this presentation will be on competition. There will always be competition, and you need to be prepared to deal with it. Now, wouldn't it be great if there was no other people out there, no other businesses or services or products that did what you did? You would own the market. You could sell 1 million widgets to 1 million people every day of the year. Sadly, this isn't the case, but competition is a good thing. It helps us to make better products, to come up with better ways to serve customers, and to continue to improve. And so competition is a good thing. And let's face it, some people are competitive by nature. They love to compete, and that's the whole fun of it. Business is like a sport to them. They want to win. They want to compete. They want to beat the other guy and put him out of business. Well, maybe this isn't you. Maybe you have no competitive drive to you, but you do have to understand that there is competition in the marketplace, and no matter what business, product, sector, industry you're in, chances are 99.9% that there is going to be somebody competing with you for the same customers. Now, competition can be articulated in a couple ways. Direct versus indirect competition. Now, direct is sort of like how it sounds. People who offer the same product or the same service. So if you're in the skateboard business, if you're in the sports, food, quick recovery business, they do the same thing, right? So if you're Cliff Bar, who's your direct competitor? That's right, it's Power Bar, right? But Cliff Bar came up with a better way to provide that same nutrition to people, and they've done really good for themselves. So somebody who offers the same product or the same service. If you're American Airlines, guess what? Southwest is probably a direct competitor to you. Now, but then there's also the indirect competition. So they're not directly in your space and in your face, but they're infringing upon your space, and they're starting to get into your face, right? So who are these people? They offer an alternative to the customer. So maybe somebody doesn't, they don't want to fly on Southwest Airlines. They can take a train, right? Or they can take a nice long car ride, right? So it's the same way of doing, getting somebody from point A to point B, but it's not using your service. So this would be indirect competition. Another example would be a local grocer versus Walmart. Well, Walmart provides everything, and a lot of them actually sell groceries now too, right? Versus a local grocer. So are they a direct competitor? It's kind of indirect. iTunes versus Walmart, right? Can you buy music at Walmart? Yeah, sure, you can buy a few CDs. But iTunes, you can buy almost anything that's available now, right? So these are what is called indirect competitors. They're sort of in the same space, but they offer something in a different way. There's a different route to get to the end goal of the customer. Let's put it like that. So what you want to do in this section of your paper, section of your business proposal, is to do some research on your competitors, right? And again, some new business entrepreneurs, startups, people, they want to just sort of gloss over this and say, well, it doesn't really matter. Our product is better. Our competitors are irrelevant. Well, our authors of our business, our primary textbooks say this is a big mistake, and you avoid your competition to your own peril, because guess what? They're out there, they're real, they're fighting, and they want the business just as much as you do, if not more. And so you have to acknowledge them, you have to identify them, and you have to figure out how you're going to compete against them. So you want to do some research on your competitors. You want to get as much information as you can find. You want to get information on their sales, on how big they are, how many employees they have, what their revenue and profit is, what's their strategy and position in the market, excuse me, and what competitors play in which segments. So some of this information may be available if it's a large company, if it's public. You can get, Dun & Bradstreet kind of information on your competitors. If they're smaller, if they're not public, if they're privately held, it's going to be a little harder to figure this out. So you might not be able to determine this quite so readily. Some things, though, you probably could articulate. If you understand the industry, if you understand the sector, you should be able to figure out what their strategy and position in the market is. So, who are they marketing? What is their unique selling proposition, right? What segments are they playing in? So it shouldn't be rocket science to figure out what their strategy is. And so this is important because you need to figure out, are you going to have a similar strategy, right? Are you going to be the low-cost leader? Are you going to provide excellent customer service? Are you going to add value? You know, what is your strategy going to be compared to what your competitors are? And this actually might help you find out what your particular niche is, right? So you figure out, well, there's all these people that offer this product at a really low price, but they've all got lousy customer service. And so my unique niche, my unique selling proposition is we're going to offer excellent customer service. So when you identify your customers and you do this research, you know, your strategy can begin to emerge because you realize where the hole is in the industry. You also want to discuss the competitive intensity. What's likely to happen in your sector in the future vis-a-vis your competition? Is it going to grow? Is it going to slow down? Are there going to be new entrants? Are there new products, new similar ideas that are coming out? What's going to make the competition more intense in the future? You want to be able to articulate that. Now, the authors also advocate using Porter's 5 forces analysis. And I'm not going to go too much in depth on this, but this is a great model for you to explore because some of it might be relevant to your particular business. So we already talked about rivalry amongst existing competitors, right? That's the middle circle there. Those are the people that offer a product or service that's pretty similar to what you're doing. So who are the competitors? What are the differences, et cetera, et cetera. The buyer power. Sometimes, you know, buyers have a lot of power based on their size. And this is probably not so much in retail, but if you have a particular niche kind of product, like say you're selling large cranes, I think was the example, to engineers, to people that build buildings, you know, the buyer might have a lot of power. The suppliers as well, they can have power over you as well. Going back to the buyer one, you know, think about a large company like Walmart. I mean, talk about buyer power. They can literally make or break a small company. And, you know, some of these small companies, if they get a meeting at the headquarters there, is at Bennington, Arkansas, they walk in and they can get a Walmart buyer to, you know, they pitch their product and they get a buyer to say yes and take their product on in Walmart. And boom, that's a lot of power. But here's the challenge though, right? All of a sudden now you've got 90% of your product being sold to one customer. Well, what happens if Walmart changes their mind or some better product comes in and pitches to Walmart and you're out the door, right? So you need to look at some of these forces there. Okay, so, supply of the power, and then threat of new entry, right? Is somebody else going to come into the market, and what's it going to take for you, right? So this is competing kind of against yourself. How long it's going to take to get in, what kind of specialized knowledge someone has to have to get in. So you might say you might be in such a unique position, a business product, that it's going to take somebody a long time to get in, right? So this is like, for example, say you're in pharmaceuticals. You know, not just anybody, you know, can start their own pharmaceutical company. Now, you know, I guess there's tinkerers out there can make stuff, but to be a legitimate, you know, pharmaceutical selling drugs on a large scale through doctors, through clinical trials, you know, we know that it takes literally, you know, millions and millions of dollars to bring a new drug to market. So the bar to entry in that particular sector is pretty dang high. Right? Now, take another one. Let's say you're a musician or you create music and you want to make a record. Well, the bar to entry is pretty low there, right? Any kid with a MacBook now can start cranking out beats, start singing along, and, you know, they can have a record on SoundCloud and start selling it to people, you know, pretty easily. So the bar to entry there is very low, right? Very small technical hurdles. Most people have access to the technology to do those sorts of things today. All right, so you want to sort of look at some of those things. So this is a good model here that may be helpful to some of you when you're determining who your competition is. Now, what if you're a startup? Who is my competition? Well, even for new ideas and products, there's always competition. And again, it gets back to that direct and indirect. So direct, are there other people with similar products or services? And then indirect competition, what do customers already buy? Right? So the world's gotten along just fine for all these millennia without your product. What have they been using instead of that? So, so we're getting back to the Cliff Bar example. What have people been using? Well, they've been using the Power Bar, or they've been bringing their own snacks or their own concoctions, or maybe energy drinks or gels or what have you, right? So, people have been getting along without the Cliff Bar just fine for a long time. And then competitive response. How will existing players react to your entry into the market? This is fun to think about, right? So what are the big players, what are the big dogs going to do when I get into the market? Now, this is sort of interesting to think about. What do you think, for example, yellow cab thought when Uber started up? Oh, these people, they're going to share their cars. Oh, isn't that nice? Isn't that nice? We've got a union. We've got yellow cabs. We've been doing this for years and years. We are pretty much an American icon. If you think of a taxi cab, you think of a yellow cab. You see them streaming up and down, Park Avenue and Fifth Avenue and New York. It's just, they're ubiquitous, right? And here's this little upstart, Uber. They come out of nowhere. They've got their cute little app on the little iPhone. Oh, isn't that nice? Well, guess what? One day the cab company woke up and realized that Uber was significantly merging into their competitive space, right? And so now a lot of people would rather take an Uber. I actually am one of those people who would rather take an Uber than a yellow cab. Sorry if you're in the yellow cab business out there, any of my students. But, so there's an example of how new entrants can come in and what the response is going to be like. So if you're starting a business, all right, so you got to be savvy and think to yourself, all right, what do I do if the next Uber comes along? Or what if there's some kid, who comes up with a better idea than me? How am I going to respond to that person? How are people going to respond to me? And then, as most of the sections have concluded with, is risk and opportunities. And you're going to see at the end of the project how these are all going to come together in a specific section. Because again, you want to be realistic with your backers about what the risks are and what the opportunities are. So after you've done your assessment, ask what are potential future risks, right? So the future risks of, for example, new competitors. What are potential future opportunities? Maybe you see competitors falling by the wayside. Maybe you happen to know that a certain competitor is going out of business. They're selling, they're getting out of it, whatever. You might know that. And then how likely are these risks to materialize? Okay, so you're going to start to see a common theme here now, right? In this last little section. Anyhow, that's all I've got on competition, and I look forward to working with each of you this week.